Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hi and welcome back to the English with Kirsty podcast, and today I have another new guest. So maybe you could just start by introducing yourself. Welcome to the podcast. Let's find out a bit about you, who you are and what you do.
Thank you very much for having me here, Kirsty. My name is Antoni Maroto, and I'm a medical translator and writer who's currently residing in Portugal.
Okay, so you say you're a translator. So which are your languages for translation?
My star language pair is English into Spanish, but I also work into Catalan. And depending on the context and the requirements and the audience, I may also translate from those two languages into English. And now being in Portugal too, I'm starting to also translate from Portuguese into Spanish and Portuguese into English.
Okay, and we'll come on to that in a minute, because I have a special interest in that, because as I mentioned before, I have also started to learn Portuguese. So you're further down this road than I am, which is one of the reasons I wanted you on the podcast, to try and get some good tips and information. But let's go back a little bit first to see, so when did you know that you were interested in languages? Where did that begin for you, this interest in other languages?
I guess it all started when I was really, really young, when I was like 5, 6 years old. And my mother had this thing that I had to learn English, and that what we were learning at school was not enough for me to become an English speaker.
Okay.
So she decided that I would only have time to, like read with my friends and do my own things on the weekend, that should be enough. And what she did is that she enrolled me in after-hour school in English. And that would be, right after I finished school, I would get in a bus and go to English school, where the teachers were all English speakers and the students, we were only allowed to talk to each other in English.
From 5 years old, that's
Yeah.
intense. So that could have gone either way. You could have either hated it or decided that you liked it. And I guess with you decided you liked it. But was there ever a conflict, thinking, oh, why do I have to do this? All my friends are doing something else.
Oh, absolutely. At first, I wasn't a big fan. I didn't want to do it. But over the years, when I started seeing the advantages of having an additional language, and one that I could use for, you know, I noticed right away in that very first year, how that gave me a leg up over the rest of the students in regular school. And when it came to the subject of English, which was mandatory. And that alone already made me feel more confident. And I felt we all as kids usually identify one or two things that we consider ourselves to be best at. And in that case, I identified English as my best area, my specialization. And that years later played a big role in me choosing to go to college and choosing translation.
So you may not have thanked your mother at the beginning, but in the end, you felt it was the right decision for you, and it was something that you could feel passionate about, learning other languages and using them in your later life.
Exactly. Yeah, I owe it to her. I'm extremely grateful that she made that decision for me. And not only from a professional point of view, I'm grateful, but also personal, because the fact that I learned English so early in life, that was a game changer later, in me, like making friends with people whose mother tongue was English. And even the person who is my spouse today, it wouldn't have happened if that didn't happen earlier in life, if I didn't have that early experience with English.
Yeah, so there's these choices at the beginning can lead to other things, and it's the way your life goes that is influenced by the choices you make and the things that you choose to learn. But I think we can always learn new things, and that's the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because it's very different, and in some ways, even if it's quite intense at school or at additional classes, that's very structured. It's very safe in a way, because you're only going to be asked to use what you've learned. There's a curriculum and you follow the curriculum and you learn. But when you're an adult, it's very different, especially if you're looking to use a new language in social situations, business situations. It's not the same. So how did you approach learning a new language as an adult with your Portuguese? When did you start thinking about that, and how did you go about doing it?
So yeah, it's quite different to learn a language as an adult. We're often told that it's not as easy, that the best moment to learn foreign languages is when we're younger. So I mean, I love a challenge, and it's not that I particularly enjoy proving others wrong, but there's, like a feeling of satisfaction when you're able to tell someone, see, I was right. I'm gonna make it happen, and you made it happen. So when it comes to learning Portuguese as an adult, you don't have, I guess, this like when my parents, kind of, like push me to learn English. You have to do it yourself. That's the biggest difference, in my opinion, that you have to be very self-disciplined and take a very like active learning approach to make it work for you. Because if you just rely on, I don't know, classes or something, and you check all the boxes, yes, of course, that's always gonna be helpful, but you gotta push yourself. You gotta take some additional steps to truly make it work for you and acquire that new language. You have to find ways to integrate it in your daily life. And of course, I started learning Portuguese 3 years ago, approximately. But I've only been living in Portugal for the last 6 months. So those 6 months have been way more helpful. Of course, it always helps, to be living in the country where the dominant language is the language that you're learning. It truly makes a difference.
It can do. There are plenty of people in Portugal who haven't learned anything yet, who've been living there for some time. So I think you still need some motivation, or there will be ways to avoid learning the language. But yeah, I can accept that it's helpful. But I also think however you do it, you need that level of motivation to make yourself speak, because there are also ways of avoiding speaking to people, or
Oh,
if you really don't
absolutely.
want to do it. And so are you participating in a course at the moment, or are you learning from resources that you find online, or how do you improve your knowledge, and how do you build that into your daily routines to make sure that you do get some input in the language?
So right now, I'm relying on a number of different resources. Some of them are paid ones, like courses that like stress pronunciation. I subscribe to a course called practiceportuguese.com, which specializes particularly in European Portuguese, because there are a lot of resources online, but most of them are aimed at the majority of speakers, which are the Brazilian Portuguese. That's the market that has the most presence online. If you want to learn Portuguese, your chances are that you will end up learning Brazilian Portuguese, because that's what's more accessible. And European Portuguese is there are less resources and you have to make more of an effort looking for them.
Yeah, there are fewer resources, and also they are not always labeled. So sometimes I find that you have to click on everything to see if it's a podcast or something. It doesn't say in any of the information about it, so you have to start listening, and then you can see what it is. But sometimes it takes longer to find the resources that you want because they're not necessarily labeled. I mean, some course providers or content providers use that as part of their, I don't know, maybe a unique selling point, maybe just to make it clear what they're offering, but a lot don't. So you can spend additional time trying to identify whether what you found is actually going to be useful if you've made a clear choice about what you want to learn.
Absolutely. There's been times that I've tried different resources, and some of them offer, for instance, the possibility to take a test to kind of like see what your level is, but it's unclear whether it's going to test for European Portuguese or Brazilian Portuguese. So you only really find out as you're doing it. And sometimes they even like mix the two. So
That's
it can be a
unhelpful.
little confusing.
Okay, so you're doing that, and I've noticed because I follow your LinkedIn post that you also have chosen to start writing, and I was interested in why you decided to do that. Is it because you like writing more than speaking? Is it because you want to consolidate what you're learning? Is it because you want,
Absolutely. Of
yeah.
course, writing comes natural to me. I'm first a translator and later I became a writer too. My specialization first became medical translation, and that allowed me to discover medical writing. So I write because I love it. I write because it comes natural. And of course, it's a way to put into practice what I learn, and a great chance to, like to get feedback from native speakers on what they consider they'll often, not as much anymore, which means that I'm probably doing it right. But when I started writing in Portuguese on LinkedIn, they would send me private messages like with tips and recommendations. I like, oh, this will sound better if you write it like this, or no, we don't say it like that. It's better to say it like this because it's like more natural. Like it looks more like translation when you're like saying it this way.
Mm.
Like there's a great community, as you already know, they're out there on LinkedIn, that will help you with anything you need anytime.
And did you specifically ask for that feedback, or did it just come organically?
I think it came organically, actually, and later I would stress it at times at the end of some of the posts or even in the comments. Like I would like perhaps make like an addition to the text saying something like, I know my Portuguese is not 100% yet, but if you want to help me accomplish that, feel free to send me your recommendations or corrections in private. And yeah, people will react to that, of course.
Yeah, I think that's good, because otherwise, like with English, I wouldn't necessarily see something in English and think, oh, that's not correct, and I wouldn't correct somebody unless well, if they were my student, then yeah, that's different. If I'm working with somebody specifically on that, but I wouldn't just go up to some random person on LinkedIn and start correcting them. But yeah, if you're open and you ask for that feedback, then it is a good way to learn, because people will see it, and I think it does make you feel a bit vulnerable at the beginning. I don't tend to post as much in my other languages, but I try to use them. So not Portuguese yet, but I write in German or in Romanian, and try to be a bit more visible doing that, because it does make you feel a bit vulnerable at the beginning, because
Oh, yes.
it's not a first language, or it's not a language with which you're really familiar. Well, okay, some of these are, but I think, yeah, that there may be a mistake, and that then you think about what people might think about that. I think most of the time people are not looking for mistakes, actually. They, unless it's something directly related to your job. If you say that you're an English teacher and then you write really poorly, that's maybe something to look at. But in terms of people using additional languages, I don't think people are waiting for you to make a mistake. And I think, I don't know how it's been in the past, but I think LinkedIn is a fairly positive place at the moment, or maybe it's just that I'm connected with a better quality of people. I don't know, but I haven't seen a lot of really negative comments there recently.
I agree with you. Like, perhaps, yeah, I think we both have chosen well who to accept in our networks, and we really have truly wonderful people surrounding us. But yeah, one thing I like about LinkedIn is that I happen to come across way less, I don't know what to call them, trolls, than on other networks like Twitter, let's say.
Yeah, it's a more constructive space. I mean, obviously it's a business space as well, so if you behave badly, that's not a great advertisement for your business. But yeah, I think it's people have a bit more think a bit more before they comment.
Absolutely. Like sometimes, when I've had somebody come up to me with a comment, in which they think that they're questioning me, or they're like, I don't know, they're attempting, to like uncover something. And sometimes I've even, like answered, it's like, I don't know you. You may think you know me, but this comment in which you are talking about me, actually, I think it's saying more about you than about me. Like, think about it, for like the future, like when you come, when you come at somebody, and that, thank goodness, doesn't happen often. But it's what you were saying, that I think because it's a business space, people are very much aware of who they're representing, whether it's themselves or the companies they work for. So that alone makes it already, a friendlier space, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a good and important point as well. As somebody who learns languages as well as teaches them, I generally all my experiences have been very positive with people who are, I guess English people haven't got a great reputation for learning other languages. We're not known for that, but when I do, people tend to be quite positive about it and happy that I'm learning. And the occasional negative experiences I've had when I was trying and somebody wasn't very positive, it does show more about them. And I think it's something that we don't talk about in language courses because it generally doesn't happen that often. But when it does, it's good to try and remove yourself a bit from the situation and not let it ruin your day, because unless you went out of your way to do something that was harmful towards other people, if you just made a mistake, people do that when they're learning languages. It's normal. And I think it's far more harmful to have this fear of making mistakes that stops you from doing anything than to try.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I hear you here, and I share it 100%. Like, I've had some people, which I don't really know, if they had the best intention, but they would, sometimes it's like, oh, like I had someone from Portugal once tell me, it's like, I know some Spanish, like, some Portuguese, but I don't know if I would, like expose myself this way, because I would be showing, that I am not as good, and I don't know if that's in the best of my interest. And I can understand that approach, but in my case, I mean, I don't make a living yet as a writer in Portuguese, and I don't translate into Portuguese. So the fact that my Portuguese is not perfect, it doesn't really affect what I do. And I I want to think about it more, yeah, like you said, as a learning experience, like we can only become better by practicing. So if I don't practice my writing in Portuguese, I'll never get the chance to become better at it. So I don't mind showing myself, showing others this vulnerability that we were just talking about, that I would much rather take the risk and the chance, to maybe not do it 100%, but become better in future times by, rinsing and repeat until you do it better.
Until it sticks. If there's a mistake that you keep making, it, I don't mean you specifically, but us as human beings, we sometimes get stuck on the same things, and then if you see it enough times, it will help you. And I think that's why it's really good also to consume a lot of content in the other language, because okay, that is passive, but it's also learning how native speakers use their own language, how they construct sentences, how those ways of expressing ideas may be a bit different from what we used to in other languages that we speak. And I get so much information and so much inspiration from observing how other people use their language, and I think that really helps me to use my additional languages better. So I try to follow accounts that use those languages on, say, LinkedIn, or I try to find things that interest me as well, because otherwise it's not it's not as motivating to read it. But at the same time, I really want to consume more information, because I think that helps us to become better writers and speakers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you'll probably agree with this, but I wouldn't be the writer that I am today if I wasn't a reader first. Like, of course, when sometimes people ask me, like, what inspires you to write? And the answer is as simple as reading others. That's the number one probably inspiration for me. Like, I wouldn't write if I wasn't reading others.
In any language, right? In your first language.
In any language, even. Yeah, like in my first language too, of course. Yes.
That's the safer part, the part where I think, I mean, I would agree, I don't write blogs in other languages at the moment, but I would certainly agree that it's easier to write than to speak, because you've got more time, you can think about it, you know, there's something a bit more, even more vulnerable about speaking. So how do you then approach this? Because if you become a good writer and you don't speak, that's also not ideal, especially when you're living in a country. So how do you put yourself in situations where you have to speak to people?
Well, here in Portugal, I have no other choice but to try my best. And I try to, like we were talking about, you know, like reading, I also, of course, you know, look for audiovisual content like on YouTube or TV to like hear how people speak here in Portugal. So there's this guy on YouTube whose name is Leo, and he's got a channel called Portuguese with Leo. And he really is good at explaining Portuguese to non-natives. He even has a course about how to pronounce. And the way that he pronounces and his diction, he's one of, like, I would call him like my role models. Like I'm trying to model my Portuguese after him. So that's what gives me confidence to when it's time to talk to people in Portuguese here in Portugal, I try to emulate him, like follow on his advice, on his tips, and the way that he talks. That's what I try to replicate.
Yeah, find someone whose style you like, who you find easy to watch, and then to try and speak as he does, so to match your pronunciation with his, or to copy in a way.
Exactly, because I don't know if you agree with this, but I think that the best way to learn to speak a language is by becoming a great imitator of native speakers. I think it's always worked for me, and I've heard the same, you know, from others, that if you're good at imitating others, your chances are that you would find it easier to speak foreign languages.
For the pronunciation, but then you need to also discover your own voice. Like, how do you like to communicate? How do you want to get your personality across? How do you want to express your ideas? And that takes time. That's a work in progress for most.
Oh yes, languages. It is, absolutely. I feel in my case, I'm way more ahead, perhaps, you know, writing than speaking. That's going at a slower pace, but it'll happen. Sometimes we tend to, or we want to, like, get ahead of ourselves, but sometimes you just have to be patient and trust, you know, that it's getting better every time, and it's just you just have to be patient to see the results that you expect to see.
Yeah, it's about having reasonable expectations of yourself, and I'm not always very good at that, because I can be quite I expect it too much sometimes. But also not allowing, like, if you imagine them as four different people going on a journey, not allowing the one that's the furthest behind to get too far behind, because then it's really difficult to catch up. because I've done that with another language, not one that I speak now, but my speaking got so far that I could read, I could write fairly well, but I couldn't speak because I didn't speak, and then it got further and further behind, and then it was really difficult to do anything about that, because people knew that I understood quite complex things when they wrote them to me, but if they asked me something simple when they were speaking to me, I couldn't respond. So I learned from that experience, and I don't want to do that again. But I think, yeah, there will always be things that are naturally more appealing to you because of the way you like to do things. And I think sometimes if you've had a long day, then read something, listen to something, do something you enjoy, but also remembering that other skill, the one that you find hardest, does need to be developed. Otherwise the gap will get too big.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to make a page for our episode on my website where people can listen to it. It will also be available in all the other places where you get your podcasts. And I will add your links to that page. But where would you say is the best place for people to contact you if they want to find out more, if they want to see some of what you do? Where do you spend most time online?
Well, I have my website, which is www.antonimaroto.com. And if we're talking about specifically social networks, definitely a LinkedIn person. That's where I put most of my focus and time to network and publish the things that I write and interact with people. That would be my LinkedIn profile.
Okay, well, I'll add both of those links, and if you want to add any of the others, like the blogs, then that's fine as well. If you send me them, I'll make sure that they're on our page. And I'd like to thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing your ideas and experiences with us. Thanks for being on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.